Good evening, members. Good evening, officers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen in the public gallery. This is a special meeting of the council, and as such it is called to discuss one single item, and we do not have, as a result of that, at special meetings any of the normal business of the council. So we do not have informal questions, motions by members, formal questions by members of the public, and so on. So let's get straight on with item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have received apologies from councillors Brian Adams, Paddy Blagden, John Fraser, Pat Frost, Val Henry, Nick Holder, Robert Knowles, Denise Legal, Dennis Lee, Stephen Reynolds, and councillors Jeanette and Stuart Stenham.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. As Deputy Leader of Surrey County Council and as Deputy Chairman of its Investment Board, Councillor Peter Martin has declared a non-pecuniary interest regarding the Brightwells regeneration development, but due to his close involvement and this conflict of interest, considers that it's appropriate to withdraw from the whole meeting and is not in attendance for this evening's proceedings.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to declare an interest from the floor? No? Okay, thank you very much. We move to item 3, the meat of tonight's agenda, the minutes of the special executive meeting which was held today, earlier today, for which the minutes have just been circulated. Leader, do you wish to move these?
Mr. Mayor, I do. I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Leader, do you wish to speak to this? Do you wish to come to the front?
I will, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was at the meeting earlier this evening, even though it says that I wasn't. Just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is one item that the Special Executive considered earlier this evening, and that is the Brightwells Farnham Regeneration Scheme and the proposed amendments to the development agreement. I would remind members that councillors of the Executive this evening were considering those amendments in their capacity as the landowner, and not in relation to planning. They were considering these amendments as landowner. I think that everyone here this evening knows the scheme in detail. You have very, very detailed and complex papers that you have had the opportunity and time to read and digest. I'm sure that all of you will join with me in saying that this is a great opportunity for us to really regenerate a much needed area in much needed regeneration in Farnham, and the area itself has been the subject of this proposed scheme for some 14 years now. So I think really this evening we all have an opportunity to actually make a decision once and for all and move this scheme forward and really make it happen. And that is a great opportunity for all of us. After all, I think we all need to ask ourselves, why were we elected as councillors? Why we chose to stand as councillors? Because we want to improve our towns, our parishes and the borough where we live. And ultimately, this scheme does just that. It not only regenerates the area, it delivers huge amounts of jobs, 400 plus in the actual construction phase, and another 430 plus in terms of ongoing jobs. It delivers new homes, much needed shared ownership homes. Again, a great chance for a number of our residents, local people in Farnham, to actually get their foot on the housing ladder. And we all know how hard that is. So, Mr. Mayor, there are numerous benefits, a number of other community benefits, new cinema, restaurants and retail, all designed as well, not just to regenerate that area, but regenerate the whole area of Farnham. And of course, what we need to remember is that not only are we regenerating Farnham and bringing huge benefits to Farnham, with all the benefits to the economy that we're talking about here, but in addition to that, we're offering and actually bringing to residents and to Waverley a significant ongoing income revenue stream. And that is not to be laughed at. Let's face it, £800,000 or £900,000, which is a very conservative estimate in terms of income stream, is really much needed in an economy where councils like us are facing significant cuts in government grant and need to do all we can, which is what we are doing in this proposal, to deliver an ongoing income stream. That is really important. What is equally as important is that we've taken advice, proper, prudent, legal advice. We've taken advice from leading counsel as well as expert lawyers to investigate and look at all aspects of any potential legal challenge. We've taken advice from our auditors, Grant Thornton, in terms of the audit process. And we've taken advice, and GVA, an internationally renowned valuation firm, have actually fully endorsed the Section 123 report in terms of ensuring that we are receiving best value, best consideration in terms of the financial appraisal that is before you from Crest Nicholson. And that is really important. It is incumbent on us as a local authority. We have a statutory duty to ensure at all times that we receive best consideration, and that is exactly what we have done. So I have no hesitation in endorsing the recommendations and commending them to Council, but Mr. Mayor, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Before I open the debate to your good selves, could I remind you that under the rules you have one opportunity to speak for a maximum of 4 minutes. I would remind you that this is not in any sense a planning meeting, and we are here as the landowners to discuss landowner matters. Please don't waste your 4 minutes discussing things which are not in the purview of this meeting. Where it is possible to do so, I urge you to stay within the matters in the white sections of the reports. I would like this session to be as transparent as possible and allow for the public to stay for as much of this meeting as can be accommodated. I am sure that at some point we will need to go into exempt, and when that happens, I assure you that I will give due allowance. People who have spoken and wish to speak in exempt matters but have already spoken, I will give some allowance for that. So, who would like to open the batting? It's a very short meeting. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought you were studiously avoiding me. Mr. Mayor, I'm concerned about the constant complaints one hears about the proposed removal of the Redgrave Theatre. My husband and I moved to Godalming in July 1988 to work in Jumps Road Church and made a point of attending pretty well every opening night at the Red Grave. We witnessed 2 incarnations of the theatre, and towards the end of its commercial life were often part of a select audience numbering little more than a dozen or so. When I hear such protests, therefore, I have to ask myself where these people were when the theatre needed their support most. I know the theatre was built with the aid of public subscription. Indeed, Mike and I also contributed to the attempt to save it. However, Waverley was obliged to use taxpayers' money on several occasions to bail out the theatre, a situation which simply could not be allowed to continue. Having walked around the site on Saturday and had the proposal fully outlined to us, I have to admit to being impressed. I find the development very exciting. I am sure it will greatly enhance and rejuvenate an otherwise neglected corner of Farnham and will be an asset for the community as a whole. I wonder, though, whether it might be possible to have one of the cinema studios available as a flexible space, rather like the Borough Hall here or Cranley Arts Centre. This could possibly then be used for events like loud band gigs that would benefit from soundproofing, thus enabling the Maltings to be even more effective with its other theatrical works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Please, Mrs. Sanders, you cannot raise a point of order from the public gallery. Please sit down. Please remove yourself. Please remove yourself. Please sit down. Thank you. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry I'm overdressed. I've been on the council ever since this started, and it's exciting that we are now in a position, hopefully, to make a difference. Can I say I much appreciate the report and the amount of information that we have to make an informed decision on our pink papers, not only the GBA report in full, but also the lengthy leading council's opinion, which I found very helpful and useful to assess the risks. And as has been said by the leader, we have great benefits both for Farnham and Waverley, and these regeneration of Farnham are exciting plans. But as property owners, we have to weigh up achieving those exciting aims and at the same time taking into account the risks. On the benefit side, we get the regeneration of Farnham and income to Waverley, as well as recouping the investments that we've made over a number of years. And the risks are the chance of there being some challenge in the future. And those challenges, as are clear on the white papers, are either that some other developer would wish to intervene and take us to court, or that a judicial review occurs. I think there's a very strong argument, in my view, that any judicial review would be defeated, and for various reasons, as set out in detail in Council's advice. And as such, when one weighs up the benefits against the risks, I am satisfied that the risks are worth taking and that the matter should proceed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Goodrich. Councillor Mirrlees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, it's important to reiterate that the people of Farnham, by and large, have always wanted development in the town, namely East Street, but namely East Street, but one which satisfied and enhanced the needs of the community, not the developer. This would have included housing, a realistically sustainable amount of shops, a modernised day centre, retention of the bowling green, tennis courts, open space, and revitalisation of the theatre. This would have created a wonderful hub of mixed amenities which would have benefited all. Since this development was first mooted, and even with the changes it has made, it simply hasn't taken into account that people buy more and more of their things online. Hence, in Farnham, we see shops closing every month, and I'm very concerned that in the fullness of time we will have a deserted area of retail units that have had to close, along with some of the endless brand restaurants that we saw on the fly-through last night. The Regal Cinema, which is costing us £2 million, by the way, is far too large for the town, and again, like the other big seaters close by in Aldershot and Guildford, may find they are never at capacity, since the youth these days watch so much online. It was frankly laughable when the developers cited the cinema as a place where the youth could hang out. Really? It costs to see a film, or is he thinking they can just hang about outside? His happy imaginings that it could also double up as an intermittent acting area was, I suppose, a nod to the demise of the theatre they are pulling down, which brings me to another point. Not only has society changed in the way it shops and watches films on the internet, but so has the place of the arts in our economy. The arts now bring in more to the exchequer than the financial sector. That is a fact. The UCA in Farnham has now introduced this year its new acting course. More and more young people are wanting to work in this area, and we're ignoring this, not moving with the times, and destroying what could become a profitable asset, our theatre. And in the end, though, it is not a matter of whether we like the proposals or not. It is whether they can be delivered and whether we are receiving best value for the land and what the risks are. As regards deliverability of the scheme, we know that after 13 years, Crest still haven't solved the fundamental problems in their design. Crest's new road scheme would gridlock and choke the town, and they have no solution. The developer last night commented airily that all towns in the southeast simply had to deal with traffic. Well, tell that to the child with asthma. By modelling the traffic implications after the building is completed, it's tantamount to shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Because of all the problems, Crest have never produced the obligatory non-technical summary for the whole of the East Street Riverside Borelli Walk Memorial Hall project, and they can't do so. This is a major risk to deliverability, and it hasn't been considered in the report here. There is in the report huge concern about the possibility of a judicial review. When people realise the hugely diminished sum with the promise of jam tomorrow that is being paid to Waverley for this development in what is a prime brownfield site, which is now being partially funded by the financially strapped county council, I expect they won't be very happy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miralles. Can I remind the public gallery that we'd like to get on with the business. Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors, first a small apology if my diction isn't too good. I've come straight from a brutal dentist who assures me it will only be two more hours before the effects wear off. So here we go. I represent the people of Godalming, and we have lived here, myself and my wife and family, for over 30 years, and it's that side of things that I would like to talk about now. One of the problems, shall I say, of being married in Godalming is the problem of earning brownie points. And I can get good brownie points taking my wife out shopping. Now, we will both agree Farnham is a very attractive town. We like it, but it is not good for shopping. As my old professor would say, lacunae, and it needs regeneration. We do, from Godalming, go to Guildford. We go to Portsmouth and Kingston, but not, sadly, Farnham. I have studied the plans. I've listened to hours of discussions over years, and I have walked round the site in Farnham. one factor about this site, which has not actually been emphasised, but there are some of us here who would appreciate what I'm saying, is it is flat. And it will make an absolutely gorgeous place to take my wife shopping, particularly with the proposed developments that I have seen. So, Mr. Mayor, I will support these proposals, and I hope that I live long enough to benefit from this regeneration and take my wife shopping there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon-Smith. Councillor Nazir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to speak as a councillor this time. I'm going to speak as a father and a person who lives in Farnham. Since it's been announced on the radio all day, so when I was doing my school run for picking up my kids, I just spoke to a few of the parents. And they have been waiting for this project for the last 13 years. And when I spoke to my children, they were rejuvenated because of the cinema. They could go shopping while we have to drive to some places. We'll be walking to these local areas. And I have been living over here for 10 years, but been coming to Farnham for the last 26 years. And I always thought that this area should more perk up and for shopping areas and visiting around. And I think this is going to take it to that level, and I totally recommend that and say yes to it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nazir. Do I have any other people? Councillor Byam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first involvement with Farnham was probably 1996. I was then town centre manager in Guildford, and I was invited by the then town centre manager of Farnham to come and look round and to share experiences and share ideas and see what each of us could learn from each other. I was shown a bomb site. It used to be the cinema. It was boarded up, it was horrible, and the whole area was pretty run down. She pleaded with me to try to use my influence to see whether they could actually get a car park on there, which took a few years but subsequently happened. I was regularly talked to by people who worked in Guildford but lived in the Farnham area, who spent their time on Saturdays or whatever day taking their children to Guildford to go shopping because there was nothing there to deal with. So it was great to actually been involved in the beginning, the first selection of Crest Nicholson, where we had 7 companies out of the 25 that had put forward their proposals. 1 dropped out on the day, so we were down from 8 to 7. And we had 7 companies, and we spent a full day assessing that. I can't remember how many councillors were in there, and I can't remember how many people here were in that same selection panel. But there was a number of us. And it was split pretty evenly between Liberal Democrats and the Conservative group, because that's how the council was. And there was a number of members from the Liberal Democrat group who were actually sitting in the public gallery and listening and understanding. And I can't remember what the voting was in subsequent things, but nevertheless, they were participating all the way through. So it was cross-party completely on the whole thing. We went through the proposals, the 7 different proposals that came to us. Crest Nicholson stood out a mile against anybody else that put forward the proposal. There was one who's still around in Farnham, and I won't name the company or the group. They put forward a reasonable proposal. I think they wanted us to pay them $1.5 million to take the property off their hands. That's what they thought they ought to be doing. Obviously, it didn't happen. Crest was a good one. It got revised over a period from the original proposal, and it's been revised a number of times since with changing situations. It's still a very necessary scheme, a very attractive scheme, and something which we hopefully will be very proud of when it finally comes to fruition. We're not the only town that has delayed and delayed in getting things done, as my job in town centre manager in Guildford, I was looking forward to the rejuvenation and rebuilding of the Fiery Shopping Centre by 2000. It hasn't quite happened yet. So they're a little bit behind us. They were ahead of us and now they're behind us. I fully support this scheme and look forward to hopefully us passing it and getting on with the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byam. Councillor Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like the other councillor, I'd like to sort of talk pretty much as a councillor member for Farnham and also as a father. It's pretty obvious to me, since my time as a councillor back in 2011, that this topic seems to be the hot topic, and everybody's talking about it. And actually, the Farnham Herald particularly, they're talking about it. But actually, locally, at a parental level, people and parents want it. And I know that because this weekend I've been canvassing support to see whether or not they would actually support the project and if they didn't want it or not. So I've asked their opinions. And at the Green, at the Bourne, on Friday night, there were 150 plus people there. Majority were parents. And I went around a lot of them and I asked them what they thought of the current scheme and said, be brutal, be honest, do you think there is merit in this scheme or would you rather see something else? And actually the answer was pretty succinct. Everybody said, get on with it, why are we still waiting? Now this is parents. It's a different demographic, I appreciate, to maybe what the Farnham Herald will read. These parents haven't got time to read the Herald, let alone write into it. That is the problem. The Farnham Herald put up the most recent set of pictures from this scheme at the weekend, or Thursday, I believe. There have been 170 likes of those photographs on the Farnham Herald Facebook page with associated comments. And some of the comments are particularly interesting. And one that I noted was with regard to the traffic. Traffic is a problem in Farnham, and I'm no stranger to that. And I would like to see a resolution to that. However, this scheme is designed for Farnham people, not to drive to Aldershot or to Guildford or to Reading, but for them to use Farnham and walk into this area, to use the eateries, use the cinema with their children, and their children can do it without them. I pay for my children to go to the cinema. Maybe I'm fortunate, maybe I'm lucky, but that's what I choose to do. And I don't think I'm alone in Farnham. So on balance, whilst this scheme, in my opinion, over the years, I've watched it be batted for and batted against. It's been batted around this room more times than I can care to mention. But one thing I can say for sure is that in balance, what we see here with the information that we've had available to us, that last night was put to us, I think, very eloquently and articulately, I think on balance, whilst there are areas I would like to address, on balance this scheme has merits and it has many, many more benefits for those children, the future of Farnham, than it does risks. So therefore I shall be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lear. Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think this is the last time I'll appear in this council chamber, and so I'm absolutely delighted that it looks, provided things go the way that I think they will go, that we have a chance to move this very, very long-standing project, which has filled my post bag for a number of years. I have to say, when this scheme first came, at the subsequent election, when I stood for Farnham, Shortheath and Boundstone, which I still do, I was a bit apprehensive. I felt that as a proponent of the East Street scheme, which I have been very publicly and very steadfastly for all these years, I thought, frankly, I might get hammered on the doorsteps. Not a bit of it. The overriding message then was we need somewhere for our children to live and for ourselves to be able to downsize in the centre of Farnham. It eclipsed everything else. That general view has been consistent ever in all the elections I've fought since then, all the canvassing I've done and the rest. Every single election, which was basically fought on an East Street ticket, I have topped the poll by a considerable margin, except once. And I did top the poll by a considerable margin a year ago. And again, East Street was right up there, and everybody knew where I stood. The only time I did not win, in fact I was chucked out for 4 years, was I lost to two opponents who were advocating an even larger scheme. That was the Liberal Democrats. It was too large. Even for me, it was too large. But nevertheless, I went down in flames. I'm very glad to say when a Conservative administration came back, I was returned amongst them. We managed to scale the scheme down to the correct proportions which we have today. So do not pay any attention whatsoever to people who say that the majority of Farnham is against the Brightwells East Street scheme. It is simply not true.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Any other speakers? Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to cover two areas, if I may. First is the financial aspects of the scheme. I find them rather puzzling. I'll start with the land value issue. Apparently this land was valued when the scheme was first put forward at a minimum land value of around 8 million. We're now being told we're going to get a payment of around 3 million for the land. But that doesn't seem to me to be the case if you look at the actual figures. We actually own most of the land. We own just under 7 acres of this land, but we're buying additional land to help help the scheme of approximately between 3/4 of an acre and an acre, and we're paying approximately. Well, we've already paid 2.5 million for the land we've already purchased. We've still got to purchase the Marlborough Head. Now, I don't know exactly what the Marlborough Head is worth, but I'll take a guess. It's worth something like 1.5 million approximately. So we're going to be paying something like 4 million out for the land that we're buying to support the scheme. And we're only getting 3 million from Crest Nicholson. Now, I first of all assumed that somewhere in the figures we'd be repaid for the 4 million that we're paying to help the scheme, but that doesn't appear to be the case. My understanding of the scheme is the 3 million payment is for the land that we've already paid 4 million for, and the other acreage that we already own, which is approximately 6 acres. So we seem to be not only giving this land away for free, but we've paid $1 million out that we're not going to recover from the developer. I just don't understand the economics of that, particularly when you consider the real value of this land. We've paid 1.5 million for a half acre of the land, the old car park site. If you multiply that up, it means the value of this land is in excess of 20 million. So the other thing I don't understand, that the scheme seems to be a scheme that won't actually wash its face. That we're not getting out of it what we initially expected, neither are the developer. Yet we've given the land for free, and in fact, as I said, we've paid more than $1 million more than we're going to get back for it. So the economics of the scheme to me are just totally puzzling. Then I come to the issue of whether this scheme is suitable for Farnham. As a Farnham, we seem to all have to say how long we've lived in Farnham. I've lived in Farnham for about 30 years. I've got tremendous commitment to Farnham. And if the scheme goes ahead, I will hope it succeeds. And I wish it well, but I just cannot see it working. Crest haven't been able to raise the funds for this scheme. They've had to go to Surrey County Council, of all people, to raise the funds. Surrey County Council are not a professional in this field. The thing that really worries me about this scheme is the shopping. That in the fly shoot through, you see a whole load of high fashion retailers. None of these companies have signed up for this scheme. There isn't a single retailer signed up, apart from the Marks and Spencer's food store, as the so-called anchor store. A food store isn't and is never an anchor store. That will not bring people to Farnham. It will be fine for local people who are visiting Sainsbury's. I seem to be running short on time. What Farnham actually needs, we do need regeneration in this area. There's some good aspects of the scheme. We need the housing. Cinema's a good idea. We need the car park and so on. But where the shopping needs to be in the centre part of Farnham, that's the area that really, as one of the councillors said, the Farnham, central Farnham is actually not nearly as good as it should be. If Surrey County Council have tens of millions to spend in regenerating Farnham, that's actually where they should spend it. I've run out of time, Mr Mayor, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Hill.
Mr Mayor, I'm one of the ward members for Brightwells, and obviously taken a considerable interest in everything that's gone on over the years, 9 years that I've been a councillor, and I'm really pleased to see the whole thing reaching an end. I think that the current site is very unattractive, underutilised, but of course in its place we're going to see an attractive and functional development that will be an asset to our town. It will benefit both business and the community, with substantial financial benefits both to Farnham and to Waverley in the short and even more the longer term. The gain in jobs, the part pedestrianisation of East Street, improved car parking, road improvements, and let's not forget we already have a new 5-court tennis club and the Riverside car park. I'm not surprised that there has been some controversy. It is a big development, but the benefits are quite substantial. Personally, I have to say that I like the look of all the buildings, particularly impressed, and can't wait to see the green walls on the car park. The cinema sounds interesting. The public open space looks excellent. And my God, we do need more housing in Farnham of all varieties. And so I really do look forward to seeing this come to a completion.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Ramsdale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do feel it's very important in this discussion that we address the needs and the issues raised by residents, but all residents, and some of you have referred to communications you've had. Like many of the previous speakers, I too am a Farnham resident. I've only lived there 20 years. Sorry, Andy. What I have earlier today received assurances about, and I wanted to share them with you, is that I sought assurance about concerns about what was going to happen to the freehold. You know, was this ongoing income flow going to stay with us? Well, it's going to be leased, all of it, to Surrey County Council. It's got to be a lease, not a freehold. That's clearly defined in the papers, and that's the way forward. So Waverley will hang on to it, but even if we lost it, it would be to Surrey. So it's all in the public purse or public domain. I also asked about what's happening about this scheme. Is it the right scheme? And we've had lots of assurances it is the right scheme. And Andy, what I think I'd like to do in the closed session or the exempt session is discuss with you some of the numbers. They do make sense because it's all to do with our ongoing income flow. With that, Mr Mayor, I'd like to sit down and have a chance to get back up again later.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsdale. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This evening, Councillor Wheatley opened the debate with a comment which was so true. The Redgrave Theatre, there used to only be about 12 people that used to attend some of the performance there. Now, I know that to be fact because I used to be on that stage. I used to be on that stage and I used to look out in my audience and I would expect to be an up-and-coming actor calling out my lines with half a dozen people there. My parents also had a restaurant at the theatre, the Globe Restaurant, and it failed. It died because there was nothing else there. It was a dying town, and I still think it is. You know, there's parts of the town that does need vitality. We need vitality in Farnham, and this does bring hope. I mean, my generation, all they say is we need more. We need more of the restaurants. We need more shopping facilities. We need more leisure facilities. We need more housing. All I see is retirement homes in Farnham. We need more housing for young people. I'm not yet a first-time buyer, and I want to be. And I want to live in Farnham, where I was born, where I've lived for 31 years. This scheme brings that. Vitality and hope to Farnham.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Do I have any other speakers? Councillor Mulliner.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. I'll start off by saying that I've known about this scheme for many years. As a Hazelmere resident, I've listened to all sorts of people talk about it, and of course, in recent days, we've had a huge amount of information given to us. But one of the things I have heard many times is the very strong differences in opinion as to whether Farnham completely wants this or completely doesn't want it, or where the balance lies. All I can say is that in April 2013, I gave a hand to a Farnham colleague before the County Council elections by doing some canvassing in North Farnham, and took the opportunity to conduct my own admittedly small-scale opinion poll by, after I'd finished asking them for their preferences, just saying, forget about the politics, what do you personally feel about then we called it the East Street scheme? And it may not be very scientific, but out of approximately 30 people, 27 said, for goodness sake, get on with it. And that has always led me to think that, having been involved in the commercial property sector, and having known very many schemes which, when they were being considered, attracted an awful lot of opposition, but 5 years later, after they'd been there for some time, everyone was perfectly happy with them. And indeed, occasionally you have people who you were pretty certain had opposed something, now saying it was all their idea in the first place. The next issue, which has certainly caused me some interest, is looking at the financial side, because that has played a very important part. And I think there's no doubt that the attraction to Waverley of generating a stream of income from commercial property and associated cash flows, business rates, and so forth, is of extraordinary importance. The Council is facing steadily declining support from central government. So the only option is to tax the council taxpayers more. I would much rather see part of our income coming from commercial property income, which a great many other councils have already done. When I was Mayor of Hazelmere, I had a chance to visit Swanley, and I emerged a pale shade of green with envy. Swanley is a town, not a borough. But a far-sighted clerk in the 1970s had spotted the advent of the M25, had persuaded his chairman of the council to borrow public money as they could and to invest in buying land and property. And when I tell you that at that time Hazelmere's precept was well under £200,000, their income was 1.5 million, and that's a small town, of which the lion's share was through commercial property income. It's a perfectly proper way for councils to generate income and therefore spare their council taxpayers. Indeed, there are one or two lucky areas where there is no council tax at all, I understand. I fear it'll be some time before Waverley can join that rather restricted club. However, it's easy to focus too much on the benefits to the council and its council taxpayer. I feel the real benefits are indirect ones. If this goes ahead and it happens as planned, there'll be over 400 new jobs. There won't be city jobs, but there'll be jobs paying a reasonable income. And I estimate they will take something like 6 to 8 million pounds of income. And that money will be spent, a large chunk, in Farnham for the benefit of its members. The last thing I'll say, as I see my time running out, I agree entirely with Councillor Goodrich that the risks of challenge to this, the challenge may well happen, the chances of its success, I think, are low. This is not Winchester, and the developer is taking a substantial hit to his profit level. That will weigh very heavily in our favour. Thank you very much.
Well done on timing, Councillor Mulliner. Councillor King.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Mayor. Councillor Pritchard's comments about housing supply for young people in Farnham has prompted me to stand to speak in support of recommendation 4 this evening. Members will be aware that originally this scheme allowed for 36 social rented properties and 36 shared units as well. The council considered whether it could purchase the rented element of the housing provision and deliver homes for social rent, but this would not have generated sufficient capital receipt to make the housing scheme viable. Since 2011, housing associations have been required to deliver new affordable rented homes let at up to 80% of open market rents. In the Waverley area, this frequently means that they are not affordable for households on average local incomes. This situation will be exacerbated by the introduction of universal credits and the introduction of the benefit cap, which will make affordable rents increasingly unaffordable for householders in receipt of benefits. The recorded gross annual income pay for people working in Waverley is £26,300 per annum. Shared ownership enables local Farnham people to get on the housing ladder of home ownership and buy a stake, which is typically 45% of the home, in their local community. 26% of our housing register applicants live in Farnham, the majority of whom need 1- and 2-bedroom accommodation. Shared ownership requires an income in the region of £23,500 and a deposit of less than £5,000, which is comparable to the income required to pay an affordable rent without any housing benefit. Shared ownership provides an opportunity to deliver affordable homes for key workers in line with the economic strategy, and it's a wonderful opportunity for Farnham residents in housing need to get on the ladder in an exciting and modern development in a wonderful location in the centre of Farnham. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor King. Do we have any other speakers? No? In that case, Leader, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll sum up from the comments that have been made as well and try to answer as many of those as I can. Just to touch on the subject of the theatre, Councillor Pritchard has talked to it, Councillor Wheatley's talked to about it. Sadly, the theatre failed. It took £1.2 million of Waverley Council taxpayers' money with it. But what is important to remember is that we have a new proposal before us for Real Cinema, who offer a number of community uses as well as actual cinema. We also, and let us not forget this, we have nearby theatre venues, and we also have the Farnham Maltings and their Great Hall, which is a flexible theatre space and supported by Waverley. So we have got opportunities there for the theatre. In terms of the traffic and the concerns mentioned on traffic, Farnham has issues with traffic. A number of other towns locally within Surrey, and Surrey's renowned for having traffic problems. But to focus on Farnham for a minute, one of the benefits to this scheme is that there will be a significant amount of 278 contributions made that will actually enable improvements within Farnham Town Centre, not wider afield, but actually in Farnham Town Centre, and that's really important to remember as well. Now, to take the points, and I know a number of points were made about Surrey, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about Surrey. Their funding arrangements are clearly, to a certain extent, with Crest Nicholson. But what is important to remember here is that Surrey County Council are a strong funder, they have a strong covenant, and that is made very clear in the report before you in the exempt papers by GVA. And what is also very clear is that they've carried out due diligence. They want to invest in Farnham. They have a number of other schemes, Woking, for example, where they're also investing. But what's also important to remember, and we keep coming back to this point, is that their investment will give them also a significant income stream. They will be regenerating an area of Farnham, a Surrey town, and they will receive an income stream. Likewise, from the proposal before you, Waverley will receive a significant income stream. And We all know we're challenged financially. We all know that more and more we have to look at other ways, other legitimate ways to generate income, and that is what this proposal brings to the table. Now, much has been made about the fact that it's a slightly older scheme, therefore is it suitable for today's market, and so forth. And I think we need to address that. The scheme itself is actually very flexible. Whilst it has taken some 14 years to get to a stage where tonight we can, I hope, and would hope, make a decision to actually move forward, let's not forget that it's quite often the case that large schemes and schemes of this nature can take a number of years before they actually get off the ground. The scheme was impacted very negatively by the recession, there is no doubt about that. But what we need to remember is that we've now moved on from the recession and we now have a financial proposal that has been endorsed by GVA. The leisure, the social and the retail mix, again, specialist consultants have looked at that and they feel that that delivers and that will deliver what is right for Farnham. We've got some key anchor tenants there. We've got Marks and Spencer's Food Plus, and that actually is recognised, again in the GVA report, as an anchor store. But let's be clear, we don't want to actually go above about 40-45% in terms of our pre-lets. Again, that's not prudent from a business point of view, because we have to give business lets to pre-lets to attract them in. We need to give them a very favourable discount or favourable terms. And let's face it, we want to make sure that the majority and the large part of this scheme earns its money for us straight away. Now, it's good to hear from local councillors with local knowledge, and it's good that we actually are hearing what people want in Farnham. And at the end of the day, it's important to remember, as Councillor Ramsdale said, that we're retaining the freehold of this land. This is a lease, and a lease that's been granted on a long-term lease to Surrey County Council. GVA, who are valuers and experts in this field, say that it's best consideration. A number of other Surrey authorities are investing in property, are investing in income generation, and that's what we need to do as an authority. The numbers, to use Councillor MacLeod's phrase, the numbers do stack up. It's very clear in the exempt part of your report, in the pink part on page 33. The numbers add up, we get a payback, and that is why I commend these recommendations to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Before moving to the recommendations, which you will find on page 3 of the executive minutes and page 4, Councillor Ramsdale.
Mr. Mayor, I thought we were going to take some of this in exempt areas for some of the detailed financial discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsdale. I haven't had any indication from anybody that they want to do that. So we've now moved on past that, and the Leader has summed up. We're ready to move to the recommendations. Thank you. It's my intention, if it's your will, to take a single vote for the whole of the recommendations. Is that agreed? Agreed. I also understand that there was a suggestion that...
Mr. I'm just going to suggest it would be appropriate, and maybe I jumped the gun on what you were going to say, that there was a recorded vote due to the importance of this issue.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. That's exactly what I was going to say. Are you moving that?
Yes, indeed, I'm moving that.
Could we have a seconder?
I will second.
Thank you, Leader. So we will have a recorded vote. Somebody will have to tell me how we do that. So I need 5 members to stand to support the recorded vote. Thank you very much. That's more than enough. So how are we going to do this, please?
So, members, when I call out your name, please could you confirm whether you wish to vote for, against or to abstain? So it'll take a little while. Thank you. Councillor Mike Band.
For.
Thank you. Andrew Bolton.
For.
Thank you. Maurice Byam. Thank you. Carol Coburn.
For.
Thank you. Kevin Denis. Thank you. Jim Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Brian Ellis.
For.
Thank you. Patricia Ellis.
For.
Thank you. David Else.
For.
Thank you. Jenny Else. Thank you. Mary Forozewski. Thank you. Michael Goodrich. Thank you. Tony Gordon Smith.
For.
Thank you. John Gray. Thank you. Jed Hall. Thank you. Christian Hesser. Thank you. Stephen Hill. Thank you. Mike Hodge. Thank you. David Hunter. Thank you. Simon Inchbold. Thank you. Peter Isherwood. Thank you. Anna James. Thank you. Carol King. Thank you. Martin Lear. Thank you. Andy MacLeod.
Against.
Thank you. Tom Martin. Thank you. Kika Miralese.
Against.
Thank you. Stephen Mulliner.
For.
Thank you. David Munro. Thank you. Nabil Nazir. Thank you. Julia Potts. Thank you. Sam Pritchard.
For.
Thank you. Wyatt Ramsdale. Thank you. David Round. Thank you. Richard Seaborn. Thank you. Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Simon Thornton. Thank you. Ross Welland. Thank you. Liz Wheatley. Thank you. Nick Williams. Thank you. And John Williamson. Thank you.
38-3.
Give them a minute to add it up.
Thank you, members. There are 38 votes for, 3 votes against, and no abstentions. So the recommendations are agreed.
Thank you, everybody. I will formally declare that those recommendations are carried, and that concludes this evening's meeting.
Please rise whilst the Mayor leaves the chamber.